I love being an entrepreneur and hosting this top 2.5% global show to bring you authentic talks with successful founders of companies and brands. My entrepreneurial journey started after I was left for dead. Let's learn the impactful journey of today's guest now.
There's 4 parts to it: your logo, your color scheme, your voice. How do you come across? Are you hippy dippy like Ben and Jerry's ice cream? Right? You've seen those cartons, right? It's amazing to read them because they're so entertaining, right? Or are you more IBM, right? Microsoft, very Fortune 500, very conservative.
Today's guest and I both started shoveling snow, starting our entrepreneurial journey, and I met Tim through some cold networking on LinkedIn. So, Tim, thank you for joining us here on That Entrepreneur Show.
Vincent, thank you for having me, and you're my neighbor next door in Tampa.
We've got a local entrepreneur here who's got a lot of experience, a lot of great advice, and we're diving into that right here on That Entrepreneur Show. So thank you for joining us, whether on live stream or when we go live. We have a great entrepreneur to add to your network. And throughout the show, I'll be flashing his email, but he's been a focused on marketing entrepreneur for as long as he can remember. Started back in the preteen days, fell in love with magic at a young age, which also opened up a lot of doors. We'll touch on that. And then, of course, he really honed in on the business side of things to help elevate him to the next level. He's done speaking, coaching, everything in between. But Tim, let's go back to these snow shoveling days, all these early days. What are some other things you did to start making your own income, working your own hours?
Well, the first thing I remember, I had that entrepreneurial bent. My mom told me this story only about 10, 12 years ago, that when I was 5 years old, I would go around the neighborhood, pick up stones just off the road, and then go door to door selling them. Now, where did that come from, right? I mean, from a 5-year-old child, but that was the start of my entrepreneurial bent, as I like to call it. And I want to say by the time I was 9, 10 years old, I was downtown in this little hometown of about 5,000 people, going to all the small bit clothing store, women clothing stores, just to shine, windows, clean windows, empty waste. I would do anything to make money. For some reason, I knew the power of money, and I knew the power how to get money. So I started raking leaves in the fall. I shoveled walks in the winter, like we've talked about. By the time I was, I want to say 10 years old, I had a lawn business in the summer. I had 7 days a week. I had one business. I think I had one lawn a day, and it put $3 in my pocket. This is back in, I think, the 60s, right? So that's basically where it started. I've always been motivated to build, take something that I'm passionate about. Now, you're not passionate about shoveling walks, but I was passionate about money back then. So my entrepreneurial bent changed because I found out people who are most successful, their work is their play. And the line between my work and my play has always been blurred. Everything that I've done, I've had a passion for. So that's the first lesson that I learned. If you're going to be mega successful, you better be passionate about what you're doing.
And that's the truth. I know in entrepreneurship, there's more downs than ups. So if you're not passionate about what you're doing, chances are you'll be that statistic of businesses that don't make it past whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But fast forward from the shovel and snow, let's talk about the first business that you actually incorporated. Let's talk about it.
Well, what I did was I started performing professionally as a magician, comedy magician. I wasn't a comedian back then, but I was a magician. I was 15 years old, and I took it from a business standpoint. I knew that marketing, and I learned this early too, marketing is the highest leverage activity you can do in any business. And I knew that was the way, especially for where I lived. I lived in a very small community, even rural area of Pennsylvania. The old entire Northwest had a bigger deer population than people. So I knew that I had to market. I had to learn how to, the business side. I had to learn how to sell on the phone because everything back there, this was pre-internet, right? So I had to learn how people would call me, or if I cold called, I had to learn how to close on the phone. I got really good at it because it's either relate or starve, right? So there was no other alternative. We did our business by phone. At the same time, I wanted to go full time with this. And I went to college, got a degree, worked in the disability field for about 10 years, walked away from, I was 29 years old and I was the executive director of a disability organization. I wanted to be a magician, but I also knew that I couldn't make a living as a magician just doing magic in that small area. So I started a talent agency. And I bought this agency from my agent who was like 85. He was on his deathbed. He sold it to me, had one client, and I took it and I grew it from there until I sold it 13 years later. But it allowed me to, make extra income. So to compensate for the magic, the lack there. And it worked. Everybody said I couldn't do it. This isn't LA. This isn't New York. You can't do this in little. I said, watch me. So the power of marketing, you can do anything. You can sell anything.
I love how you took all the naysayers and kept them in your rear view. If you're confident, you'll get there. What advice would you give, to now you've exited this company, right? Maybe someone who is planning for an exit, some things you wish you knew that you didn't back then.
That's a good question, because what you have to learn is that it's all on you. When you go into business for yourself, whether it be a freelancer or starting your own company, it's you. You're the chief cook and bottle washer. There's nobody going to save you. It's a lifestyle, as you know. You do it, Vincent. The bottom line is it's feast or famine. There's the up days and the down days. And you have long streaks of, oh, this is great. And then the bottom drops out. And with a freelance business, you've got to remember you're the fulfiller. And that's just freelancing. Any kind of entrepreneurship, you got to do the marketing, right? Grab in the clients. Then you got to do the fulfillment, however that looks. And if you've got an agency, which I had, you got to project manage, right? So there's a lot of skills that you got to look at and a lot of things you got to pay for that used to be covered out of your job. Hospitalization, your benefits. Now this is all on you. If I can do it, anybody can do it, but you have to be committed and you really have to be passionate, because it's not an easy way to go, but it's the only way to go if you're like us.
There's only one way. I can't go back to the 9 to 5, particularly in my roles. I was underutilized. I was getting bored at times. I was just kind of making good money, but not fulfilled, not passionate. And that's why that withered off. But let's walk us through this entrepreneurial journey. You exited this company. What was next?
The next thing, well, it's kind of funny because I was passionate about entertainment. I was a magician and I just wanted to do it. Then I discovered I would take walks in the woods. I had a walking program for like 25 years. And I'd walk in the woods and I'd listen to motivational tapes and that's what kept me juiced, right? And I listened to hundreds of these speakers. And I started listening and some of them were really crappy. I hate to say it. And then I found out what they were making. It's like some of them, they weren't good speakers. Their content was great, but they weren't eloquent. They weren't articulate. And then I said, they're getting 10 grand for this talk? It's like, I want in on some of that cash. And I thought about this. Again, the entrepreneurial mind, right? Innovation. I got a great story. I've got Tourette syndrome, right? I overcame, and you said the motivation. That's always been my motivation in the early days. Not so much anymore. I don't have anything to prove. But it used to be because I had Tourette syndrome and you see me very calm, I'm medicated. But basically, when I had this really bad and I'm ticking uncontrollably, you can imagine the negative attention I got. So my motivation has always been, I'll show you. I'll show you. Right or wrong, it worked for me because it kept me, I'll show you. I wanted to just get up to the normals, right? The normal folks.
Well, look at you now. You've accomplished so much, and we're still just getting started here on That Entrepreneur Show. We're brought to you today by comingalive.podcastproduction.com, and he's walked us through his journey. What advice would you give now to an early stage founder? Now we're at your journey where you've exited, you're on another company, but looking back, it wasn't always that easy, right? You hustled, you're door knocking, you're cold calling. What's some advice you give to young folks that are starting out today?
First of all, do your due diligence and see if not so much if there's a need for it, because they always say, find a need and fill it. That's a bunch of BS. Find a want and fill it, right? People don't know what they need. And actually, I always quote this Steve Jobs quote just about weekly. Now, I semi-retired about a month ago, but I still am in it, right? I still do, and I still quote this. And he said, people don't know what they need until you tell them. So you want to do your due diligence, whatever product or service you have, and there's all kinds of opportunities now with the advent of AI, figure out if they want it, first of all. And you're going to have to do that beta test. I know information marketers, which is getting harder and harder to sell information online, they throw out the offer even before they develop the product. So there's a lot of ways to do that. But I guess go in, first of all, see if there's a need, the want, and then up your marketing game. Once you have your product or service down, that work is done. Now, you always want to continue to improve it, innovate, however, expand it, add to it, create more value around it. But the bottom line is, once you have it, good enough is good enough. And then you can have the best product in the world or service in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it's useless. So fall in love with marketing. And that's one thing I learned. 2 things you don't delegate: the checkbook and the marketing. Now, you can have somebody do the marketing, but always oversee what's going on and make sure everything's consistent. As you can tell, I'm a marketing guy because I've seen marketing is number 1. Operations your operations and SOPs are kind of number 2, how you do things.
With your expertise in marketing, could you give some marketing tips to our entrepreneurs out there? Because I know that's just another valuable area you can bring to the show.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. You got to figure out your offer. What are you selling? Make sure it's irresistible. I'm a direct response guy, which means we have a specific offer for a specific demographic, right? It's an ideal prospect. I know exactly that buyer persona. I know not just what he does for a living, how much money he makes, what he's interested in. I want to know how he thinks. I want to know the psychographics. Now, this is something that I tell young folks all the time. Get inside their heads. It's not enough to know the demographics. You got to know the psychographics today. How do they think? What are they afraid of? What keeps them up at night? What juices them, right? What motivates them, gets them fired up? If you can tap into those emotional drivers, you're going to have a much easier time of reaching them, getting them on your side, building the know, like, and trust factor. Right? Get them to know you, get them to like you, and get them to trust you, and then you can sell them anything.
And you've, again, built a career in multiple industries doing that. So that's one of the many reasons why I wanted you on the show. You mentioned semi-retired, so I didn't want to go past that. Congratulations on reaching this point. What are some things you're looking forward to now that you have a few more hours in the day?
To be honest with you, I'm looking at that because I'm going right now. That's such a great question, Vincent. The reason I say that is I'm in transition. I've always been a driven entrepreneur. I remember, I think when I built the talent agency and magic business and I was working a 40-hour week job for 7 years straight, I think I did 70 hours a week, something like that. I recognize that. And then I did that again, I want to say around the pandemic. Shortly before that, I started going really deep and I was doing about 9 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't recommend that, because I got sick and I went down with adrenal fatigue. I was just stressed. But I might go back to speaking. I'm thinking I'm exploring that right now. I had somebody reach out to me in Pennsylvania for a speaking date. And it's like, because that's where I shine. Anything on stage I do, that's where I'm happiest, whether I'm speaking or I'm performing. And when you see me speak, I use magic and humor to illustrate my point. They want high value content today, but a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Right. So if you can couch it in entertainment, they're going to retain the information and it makes me more marketable. So that's something I'm considering. I'm actually considering getting into a band because I'm also a vocalist. Yeah, just in different things, just not work related. I see when I speak, it's not work to me.
I get it. And that's a beautiful gift that you have to have something that you view that way. And everyone, I hope that's what entrepreneurship evolves to for everyone, where something you look at Tim and he's still making time for it because he loves it. It's not work. He doesn't need to work anymore, but he wants to work. And I think that's the name of the game. And Tim, now, one piece of advice we didn't ask for, and I try to provide value throughout to our audience. Maybe there's some magic lovers on here. If there's someone who wants to get involved in magic today on their own like you did, how do they start?
YouTube. I'm telling you, you can get a magic education just on YouTube alone. If I would have had YouTube, I wouldn't have had to spend a dime for the most part, aside from some props, right? We have this amazing thing called the internet where you can get anything you want 24/7. Now, when I grew up and doing magic, I learned out of books. I'm 100 miles from Pittsburgh, 100 miles from Buffalo, major cities, right? Nobody around me. I had a library at one time of over 500 magic books, card magic, coin magic, rope magic, handkerchief, every type of magic. That's how I learned. Today, you have the internet, you have DVDs, you have mentors, you can teach over Skype, you can learn that way. YouTube alone has so much free content. You might buy a routine online and get this, and you'll go into YouTube and somebody's explaining it. So it's easy to do today. It's better to have some sort of mentor. I would get involved with a magic club or something in your area, but you can do it. It's easy. And magic's bigger than it's ever been. Every show every network on TV has a magic show of some sort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something really important, just the power of mentors in your life. And that's not just for magic, that's got to be everywhere. I'm very grateful for all the ones that play a huge role in my life and my business growth. Tim, you know a lot of famous people. You've had a great career. If you could sit down with any entrepreneur who you have not met, dead or alive, to pick their brain a bit, who would you want to pick's brain?
There's a couple guys. One is extremely likable and the other one is extremely unlikable, but they're both brilliant. And I'll say that because the one is, and I don't mean to you get, but Steve Jobs is, this guy built the highest value company in the world. He was a taskmaster and a bastard to work for. He really was. Anybody that worked for him will tell you. But he was brilliant. And this guy just changed the world. Apple was, I don't know where it stands now, but just a few years ago, the highest valued company in the world, and rightly so. The other one is Mark Cuban, because to me, this guy is just an everyman. He's down to earth. He's common sense. And if I could just have lunch with this guy, what you could learn.
The Mark Cuban pick, because he also recently hopped off Shark Tank now. I read that. He's moving on to another chapter, and I love seeing people spread their wings. And he was, of course, the Dallas Mavericks owner, where he turned a poor performing franchise into a contender, and he sold it for quite a bit more than he paid for it. So I like how he's successfully able to go in different fields and still find success. Similar to you, you have overlap because you have the basics, the foundation. In entrepreneurship, you mentioned operations, marketing, SOPs. These are things we need to hone in on. Is there any other key areas in the process of entrepreneurship that you think we should highlight if we're a day one entrepreneur today?
Branding. Yeah, branding. Yeah, branding is crucial today, especially because the online world has become so hyper competitive. Now, I was in it when it was just coming on the scene and getting big around the mid 90s. That's when I think the internet was kind of born. When people started paying attention to it, I think operations and marketing are number one, but branding is up there. Those are the top three, because branding, it's so competitive online, no matter where you're at. Whether it be a social media platform, as soon as people go there and they see that profile pic or that logo, do they know you? That's what's crucial. So if you're going to be omnipresent, keep that consistent, your logo, your branding colors, and your marketing message and your voice. So those have to be consistent. That's for me, because I'm also a branding guy, and there's 4 parts to it: your logo, your color scheme, your voice. How do you come across? Are you hippy dippy like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, right? You've seen those cartons, right? It's amazing to read them because they're so entertaining, right? Or are you more IBM, right? Microsoft, very Fortune 500, very conservative. You got to figure that out and then stick to it.
I love the advice you said there about the color scheme, and I got that advice a few years ago at PodFest. Every book or podcast I have has yellow in it. Why? Yellow was my grandma's favorite color. I try to keep her with me, and she was a big role model for me. So every book will have a shade of yellow. Every podcast has some kind of yellow. And now as we've rebranded, that's just kind of how it's been. Just, you see the yellow, that's me.
I love it. That's why you're number one on here, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, we got the Left 4 Dead backdrop if you're here on the live stream, a little bit of yellow in there. That entrepreneur show, you see the yellow writing on the yellow wolf back there. We're doing a rebrand. Yellow, yellow, yellow. Great advice. And Tim, I knew this episode was going to be lights out, and you brought your A game here. Thank you so much. Where is the best place to get in touch with you one more time?
You can reach me at tim@timpic.com. Like I have my marketing website, which is timpiccirillo.com. It's my full name. It's not going to tell you a whole lot. And then Timothy Pitch. That's my magic moniker. Tell you a lesson in there really quick.
Yes, please.
The reason I did that is now we're online, so I can't muddy my branding. My branding for Timothy Pitch is totally different for Tim Piccirillo. It has to be. Are you going to book somebody with Tourette's syndrome that is a comedy magician but wants to do your lead generation on LinkedIn? No, that will muddy it. So Tim Piccirillo is totally different than Timothy Pitch. Otherwise, they're not going to take me serious. So if you got 2 separate, diverse businesses that have nothing to do with each other, you better have separate brands.
I love that. And thank you so much for the advice you brought today, all the wisdom. And I wish you continued success in this next chapter of your life, Tim. And I look forward to keeping in touch. My name is Vincent A. Lancey, and this is That Entrepreneur Show. Please remember to subscribe so you stay current with each entrepreneur. And I can't thank you enough for tuning in to keep this show a top 2.5% global show. And this time, we're signing off, both of us right here in the Bay Area. Tim, thanks so much.
Thank you, Vincent. Great.
Thank you for tuning in and keeping this show a top 2.5% global show. Remember to subscribe to stay current with our rockstar entrepreneurs, and be sure to check out our show partner, comingalive podcastproduction.com.